Our guest in the studio today is Patrick Godi. He is the youth representatives to the Tumaini Peace Initiative and also a member of Civil Society Forum. Godi, it's good to have you with us here today. Happy New Year, first of all.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel Akile. I also extend my Happy New Year wishes to you. And also especially to our South Sudanese people back in the country and in many other countries in the world. I want to say welcome from the festive season and also say a Happy New Year to all of you.
Yes, we are back here, Glee Hotel in Nairobi. Same room. A few weeks back, we had a discussion about the process of Tumaini, you and together with Women Representative Bridget. Now, let's have your perspective, first of all, Patrick Godi, on the resumption of the Tumaini Peace Initiative. What do you make of it overall, in general?
Thank you once again. Before I can come to your question, I also would like to take this opportunity to extend my condolences and also on behalf of the stakeholders at the Tumaini Initiative to the families of the victims of our people who were brutally killed in Wad Madani, Al Jazeera in Sudan. It is regrettable that in this modern age we could have such serious violations on our people, and we also would like to take this opportunity to urge the government of the Republic of South Sudan to follow up on the measures as stipulated by His Excellency the President, to ensure that there is protection of civilians, South Sudanese civilians and others within the Sudan, but also to ensure that the process leading towards justice for those victims is not only stops with the investigation committee that was established. As you know very well, we have now become allergic to any formation of a committee to investigate any matter because rarely do we see the outcome. So I believe that this time around, our government will follow up with their counterparts in Sudan to ensure that there is justice for our people. Now coming to your question about the resumption, personally and also the wider stakeholders at the peace talks here, we are happy to engage with the process. In December, we had a Christmas break to allow for members to go and visit their families, but also to take time off to refresh and then return to the process. Now we are back, and since Monday, the 20th, there has been preliminary discussions between the government, the opposition, and the mediation. And it is basically a follow-up from where the talks had stopped in December regarding defining the relationship between the Tumaini Initiative and the revitalized agreement for resolution of conflict, which is currently being implemented in South Sudan. But also importantly, to discuss other key aspects like the new mechanisms that have been created under the Tumaini consensus to see how they also fit into whatever outcome that might be agreed upon. But so far, what we have seen is that the two parties here, the Godi and the UPA, seem to have stuck to the positions that, in fact, led to a deadlock in December. The very reason why we couldn't have much progress in December was because the parties stuck to their different positions, with the government requesting for a renegotiation and opening of the 8 protocols that had been initially agreed in July, while the opposition was maintaining that Those 8 protocols was an outcome of our collective efforts, the government, the opposition, and the stakeholders, and therefore they are binding on all of us, and they should be the basis for continuing the talks. There couldn't be an agreement, and therefore the talks were adjourned. So again, we are seeing a repeat of that same scenario where everyone is holding to their position.
Now, let's talk about the way forward here, because I asked this question yesterday. I asked Lual Dao, the spokesperson of UPA. It seems like there's nothing new. This is the same sentiments and the same scenario of December last year. Government insisting that Tumaini should be an annex to the revitalized peace agreement, trying to adjust or in one way or another reopen the initial 8 protocols. Opposition is still insisting that we should continue from where we stopped, which means we are remaining with responsibility sharing our protocol, and that Tumaini should be a stand-alone agreement. Now, where is the role of stakeholders, especially civil society activists, and you personally as someone who's representing youth in the process?
From the onset of the Tumaini initiative, we have played a substantive role. We have contributed to the content of those 8 protocols, and therefore we also wholly own the outcome. It was not a result of any one group imposing their ideas, but it was a result of intense negotiations, compromises, concessions, and that is why we have the 8 protocols. For us, what we see is that, in fact, this new rhetoric that is emerging is more of a political negotiation. But when you look at the Tumaini consensus protocols and the RRCs, I think there is already great complementarity. So we need to appreciate that fact that the Tumaini came and saw some gaps within the RRCs, and we said, how can we fill those gaps to ensure that we can implement the RRCs? So even on principle, I think there is a great recognition that the RRCs is not being thrown away. However, we do acknowledge that there have been challenges around its implementation. And Emmanuel, you know very well there has been already 2 extensions, with now elections scheduled for December 2026. However, the processes, the task that should be accomplished to allow for the democratic elections to take place have largely not been implemented. You can talk about the security arrangements, you can talk about building the capacity of institutions to be able to deliver on the mandates like the Electoral Commission, the Political Parties Council, and even the National Constitutional Review Commission. There has been no significant strides to really convince us that even by 2026 we could be in a better place and peacefully end the transition. So with that full knowledge, then what can be done? I think there has been an issue around the financing of the agreement. Most of these institutions that have even been established continue to complain about the lack of funds to run their activities. But also we see that South Sudan is not a poor country. Yes, you can talk about the disruption to the flow of oil from February 2024, but before that you can still ask legitimate questions that we're earning hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars annually. Why were we not able to allocate the necessary budgets to different institutions and mechanisms to ensure that they do their role? And that's why under Tumaini there was a reconfiguration of the oversight commission, and also establishing a body that could mobilize resources, but also ensure its efficient utilization to meet the priorities that will be reached upon by the government of South Sudan.
Since you mentioned election, Patrick Godi, isn't the Tumaini also going to add another extension into the already extended transitional period?
Well, if we go by what had been signed in July 2024, the consensus was to have a 3 years transitional period. But that was even before the extension of the agreement in Juba. So if by that time we had signed an agreement, we'll be talking about the end of the transition by 2027, which is now actually 2 years, 2 years from today. Of course, from a citizen perspective, South Sudanese, our people are generally fatigued with the cycle of extensions and transitions, and it will be in their interest to really have the shortest time possible to transition out of this perpetual transition, which they rightly feel has not been serving their interests. But also we have to appreciate that through this agreement, sometimes you agree on very ambitious projects and initiatives across many areas, from humanitarian to security to constitution, and these are time-consuming activities. So it will not be fair to give a timeline which is not realistic, and that's why we are emphasizing, let us be realistic with even what we agree on. Let us not overpromise and not deliver at all. We rather have one or two things and do them than to paint a very beautiful picture of what we're going to do, this and that, and we completely fail. Again, on the question of election, we have in fact agreed here that the priorities of the Tumaini initiative is to accelerate the pathway to elections and the making of the permanent constitution. But what we are saying is perhaps it is now important to detach the two processes. The two processes should not be a hindrance for an end of the transition. As we have seen has been the case with the RSs, which has tied elections to a constitution. If you do not have a constitution, then you do not have an election. And this has been the case since the first extension in 2022. But we're saying, yes, we need to have a permanent constitution. That is the result of the South Sudanese people actively participating, giving their input and ideas, and owning it. But also at the same time, we're saying that election is an important democratic principle that we should appreciate and implement as a country. So elections should be able to take place without it being impeded due to the lack of a permanent constitution that is promulgated.
But that's what the revitalized peace agreement states. So what can be done about that? It's something that all parties have already signed.
Exactly, and that's why we're saying we have identified that as an obstacle to the end of the transition. And if we are going to agree in the Tumaini, we are going to have to acknowledge that and appreciate that the two can no longer be tied together. There has to be prioritization of both without the other being a hindrance to the end of the transition.
Yes, and Godi, since the resumption of the Tumaini on Monday, stakeholders were not actually here, and I understand most of you arrived yesterday, and we're expecting you to to actually be fully engaged or involved in the process of the resumption. You already have an idea, you already know the position of the government, the position of the opposition, the statements they have been making. So what's new that you are bringing on the table as civil society groups or stakeholders in general?
At this moment, we have noted two things that have happened. First, the government of South Sudan delegation was finally allowed to make a presentation of their position, which they had not been able to do so in December. I think that is also progress in itself. Of course, they have articulated their vision for how the Tumaini initiative should conclude, with it ending as an annex or a complement to the RRCs. We are yet to hear officially from the opposition in terms of responding to that very position that was presented by the government. But for us, I think at the time we were living, the mediation had developed a framework agreement after carefully studying the position of the government, the opposition, and even the stakeholders. So we had expected that that will be the basis of the resumption. But anyway, we'll know more from today's plenary session. And I think that will be the right platform for us to ask the government and the opposition and the mediation regarding the way forward. But for us, at least we have that understanding that that framework agreement that was developed by the mediation will be the basis of resuming this round of talks.
Yes, and Godi, in all the initial protocols, has one of them addressed the issue of trauma in South Sudan, especially the issue of trauma healing and also conflict mitigation in South Sudan?
Yes, we have a comprehensive protocol on communal violence, armed civilians, and land disputes. And Akile, you know very well how land is a sensitive issue in South Sudan and a trigger for many of the conflicts we have had at least the subnational level, communities fighting the other, even states within the country are quarreling over their boundaries. So we feel that if we adopt that protocol, it can help to address some of those disputes and the trauma that it has been able to cause to our populace. I mean, their families, their children that inherited land from their parents, and some of these lands have been grabbed. Of course, that's already a cause of trauma, especially where you have a weak judiciary that cannot be able to even give justice to people who have lost land and property rights. And this has, in fact, even challenged the livelihoods of many families, the ability of widows to take care of their children. This is a big cause of trauma. But also you have seen there are mobilizations around issue of land, with groups saying your land is being taken if you do not stand up right now and defend and fight for it, then you are going to lose it and have nowhere to live in South Sudan as a community. These are very serious issues that we hope, at least with that protocol, it can be addressed. Right. But also we have appreciated the chapter 5 of the revitalized agreement, which talks about transitional justice, about truth, healing, and reconciliation, accountability, and so on. So that is a very comprehensive package which we believe can also help in addressing the issue of mitigating conflicts and then addressing the long-standing trauma that we have endured as a people. I think this is a discussion that we had when the talks were beginning, and we said we have the RRCs in Juba. First signed in 2015 as the ARCs, then revitalized in 2018, and now we have come again in 2024 under Tumaini initiative. What is it that is going to be different from all the other previous agreements that have been signed? And our friends and partners of South Sudan were also asking the same thing. Why are you still negotiating for a new agreement and you have an agreement that is not implemented in South Sudan? The chief mediator, General Lazarus Sumbeo, who is an accomplished man and helped in mediating the CPA, also told us he does not want to write a new agreement. Because I think in South Sudan, agreements have now just become more symbolic. It does not carry the spirit of the content that will really have changed the situation of our people, improve on the economic situation in the country, improve on the security, and so on. And we're saying that writing a new agreement by itself, if we look at that history that I just mentioned, will not be able to change anything in the country, even when we sign Tumaini. As long as there is no change of minds and heart of those who are given the responsibility to implement it, there's going to be no difference. As long as we continue to see the mistrust among the parties, among our political leaders, it is not going to make any difference. So I believe even there couldn't have been a need for Tumaini to happen in Nairobi if our leaders in Juba, across the country, were able to sit on the same table and discuss the issues of the country and dialogue and reach an agreement. So I think we are suffering from the spirit of coming together as brothers and sisters on the table and resolving our issues. So I think we should not really even pitch our hopes very high that when a new agreement is signed, then it could change the narrative on the ground. But we should emphasize to our leaders, and I want to tell this to our people, our good South Sudanese people throughout the country, that it is your right to demand your leaders to exercise their power and authority according to your needs and interests. And I think this also comes to the other question where David Magog was asking about hearing about the position of the government and the position of the opposition. And where is the position of the South Sudanese?
Where is our right?
Where is our right?
Even youth.
I think it is high time that South Sudanese begin to exercise their democratic rights. And they have the responsibility to question their government, to disagree with whatever they see is wrong that the government is doing. If South Sudanese feel now is the time to end these transitions, they have to make this very clear and loud. And in fact, our position as stakeholders, we are saying that we are tired of the transitional governments. We need to see that the right of the citizens to vote is restored. The power has to be restored to the people. So any elected government has to come from the people. And that is why we are really saying that even within Tumaini, we are prioritizing elections. Because it is only through elections that you can restore the power to the people. And I think generally across the country, people are in support of elections to take place. In fact, when the government announced the extension, I was observing the media houses, including the iRadio, the level of frustration that people express with that decision to extend the life of the government was very bad. So South Sudanese need to know their rights, and in our simple ways, we are trying to sensitize and raise awareness to them through the many activities we carry out in the country, so that they can be able to ask their rights. Regarding the question of the youth, it's important that youth interests are not left out under the Tumaini. And we have emphasized previous provisions from the RRCs which talked about empowering young people to economically participate in rebuilding the economy through the Youth Enterprise Development Fund. That has not been implemented since 2018. We are re-echoing it here in Tumaini that this time around it must be implemented. We also said that young people have largely been left behind from the governance of the country. They have to be included across parliament, across other institutions, to ensure that their voices are always carried there. Their issues are taken to the table, and there's an understanding whether there will be a policy decision to address it.
Right, let's go to James Dward here.
And James talked about the position of stakeholders. You know, negotiation is an evolving process. If you asked us this question in the beginning, we'll have told you that we needed a quick agreement that could agree on conducting elections by December 2024. But of course, you know, the process is now 1 year. And again, you compromise, you concede. And where we have reached our position is that the framework agreement that the mediation had developed is the basis for the resumption of the talks. And that framework agreement basically tries to integrate the RRCs and the Tumaini so that we have one agreement that we are implementing in South Sudan, prioritizing elections and the constitution-making process. So this is our position as stakeholders.
All right. Any last message in less than 30 seconds before we wind up?
Brother Akile, with deep regret, last night we saw a statement issued by the National Communication Authority which requested the telecom companies to shut down social media.
Especially the two giants from Zain and MTN.
Zain and MTN. And also they were blocking some of the giant social media networks, that is Facebook and TikTok. I think that is a very clear violation of the citizens' right to expression. We have seen the important role that social media has played in our country in terms of facilitating communication, in terms of enabling businesses to grow and reach out to their clients and customers. We have seen how South Sudanese have also been able to use it as a platform to express their issues to the government of South Sudan. So I think it has been a bridge, communication bridge between leaders, the people, people doing business and all this. And shutting it down, I think, does not help. In fact, it only undermines the good things that I just mentioned, the ability of young people who are doing businesses, communicating, and this is going to affect how we do things. So I think the government really has to reconsider that decision. It is not in the good interest of the South Sudanese, and it is not even in its own good interest, because if you have a lockdown, no communication, no information flow, I think it breeds ground for propaganda, for misinformation, and so on. And you know very well, South Sudan, how things can quickly get out of control because of
right. Emmanuel Joseph Akile.
Right. Thank you very much, Patrick Godi, Youth Representative to Tumaini Initiative. Thank you for joining us on The Dawn today.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel Akile.
Yes, and that's all for today's edition from the second half from Nairobi. In the second half, The Dawn. Emmanuel Joseph Akile, my name, and then behind the scene is Low Nelson.